People. Welcome to the Stitch People podcast. I'm Lizzie Bean, your host and the founder of Stitch People, where our goal with cross-stitching is to ignite your personal creativity, and our goal with the podcast is to help you make some new friends while you're at it. Today's interview with Jaimee is so fascinating to me. First of all, she is a musician. She did her undergrad in music. She's a music teacher, and that's always a lot of fun for me to talk about. I relate with that on a lot of levels. And also, Jaimee was more or less recently diagnosed with MS, and that has affected her journey in music. It has affected her Stitch People journey, and it's been really cool to chat with her about the impacts of a diagnosis like that on her life and on the people around her, and how people who haven't gone through something like that can support people who have, how to talk about it and how to navigate those kind of sticky, uncomfortable situations. So it was a really enlightening conversation. I appreciate Jaimee's openness, and I can't wait for you to hear about it and learn from her and get her perspective on things. She's so full of energy, and I just know you're going to love this conversation. So enjoy. Welcome to the Stitch People podcast, Jaimee. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's always fun to see a new face and put a new face to a name. So Give us kind of the rundown. Who are you? Where are you from? What's, your family life like? Just give us kind of the little context.
Cool. Okay, so my name's Jaimee. I am in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. It's about 2 hours south of Calgary. So Canadian gal. I was born and raised here. And so all of my family's here. My mom, my dad, my sister, her fiance, my boyfriend. I have 2 fur babies that just give me life, and they're just like my little rescue
Feline
babies.
Feline or canine?
2 little kitties, and they're not kittens anymore, but they will always be kittens to me.
Always kittens in the heart, yes.
Right? So
we've got like a 14-year-old dog who's still my puppy, so
always and forever, right? Yeah. So I have Jack and Penelope. They're my little babies, and I'm pretty much a crazy cat lady, but so all of my people are here with me, and it's just
that's awesome.
It's a great little town, and so that's kind of
phenomenal.
that.
That's very cool to put you in the on the Canadian Stitchers. We've had a number of Canadian folks on the podcast this season, interestingly, which has been really cool. We had, I think Crystal was our first, and we've had a number. Who did we just have? Karina. Karina's in. Anyway, lots of Canadians. Love it.
Well,
represent.
It's really cool actually, because so I'm a musician, and I'm in a women's choir, and I have my Instagram and I post all my stuff. And somebody from the choir, she came up to me. She's like, do you do Stitch People? And I was like, yeah, I do. She's like, I do too. And she's actually the reason I'm here. She's like, you have to go on the podcast. You have to do it. And I was like, no, I can't. She's like, you have to do it. So shout out to Amanda. So another Canadian.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for the tip. That's so great. And you're both in the choir together. Tell me more about your musicianship. Have you always been musical?
So I actually have a degree in voice from an undergrad degree. Yeah, so I'm an opera singer. I teach voice. I'm actually in my studio right now. It's my quiet space. So I teach voice through the University Conservatory here in Lethbridge. And I'm the assistant director of the university choir and this women's choir. And I'm the general manager of the music festival in our city. And so it's just like, it's everything that I do. And I've been singing since I was like 3 years old. It's just kind of that thing that I knew I was going to do that for the rest of time. So
great. Are you one of those people who my undergrad was music as well.
I knew that.
So a lot of people, like my mom and dad met at music school. She did the opera program too, but it's in a lot of people don't know, when you go to music school, when you want to study voice, often opera is kind of the only option to study voice. So are you one of those people who wants to sing all the things, but like you had to do opera to do voice? Or do you actually really enjoy opera? Is that kind of your thing?
I like it, but I wouldn't say it's my specialty. So like when I was a kid, I did a lot of musical theater and, pop and folk and all these things. And like, I did some of the classical stuff because, my teachers wanted to, lay the foundation and teach me the rules and stuff. Yeah. And so it's kind of the case at the university. That's the stream. It's the classical voice thing. So I was lucky enough when I went there, it was the first year of my professor's job in Lethbridge, and she's an early music specialist. And so I got to play around with a lot of like chant and like Hildegard von Bingen and like really cool music. And so she was
like
really
11th century, I want to say.
Yeah, like she's like the OG. Yeah.
Yeah, for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah, right, which is everybody. So so it was really cool to work with her because she, I mean, same thing. We did a lot of the classical stuff and I did the operas and I did all the shows, but she really let me kind of explore the really old music and the contemporary music and all of these amazing things. And I'm actually back at the university now again with her doing my master's. So so it's been...
What's your master's focus?
Well, okay, so in 2019, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis with relapse remitting MS. And I graduated from university like 10 years ago. So I was working in retail and I loved it. I had a great job and I was happy. And then I got this diagnosis and I don't know. I was like, well, what do I do with my life? You know, because with MS, you don't really know how it's going to go.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, so for those who might not know, and even I myself am not super familiar, my understanding, let me tell you what from what little I know, think MS is. You see how spot on this is. So in my understanding, MS, and I also feel like fibromyalgia are kind of in a similar category of kind of like ambiguous pain that can sometimes be just a low hum in the background to like a fully debilitating can't get out of bed problem, and you kind of never know. It's like a mixed bag every day, right? And you don't know what, and it's like lethargy and kind of like mysterious chronic fatigue and pain. Is that, that's kind of like my very generic understanding of these things. So
no, it's good. And
correct what's wrong and expand what needs expanding.
That's so good. So they call it the snowflake disease because really no two people have the same experience. Like some people can... You know, they'll have different presenting symptoms, completely different than other people. I remember I was driving to lunch. I was going to meet my grandma for lunch one day. And I'm driving down this main street in our city, and my eyes just went double. And I'm seeing like 6 lanes of traffic instead of 3. And I'm looking and I'm like, okay, something's off. And you know me, I'm like, oh, maybe they're just dry. I'm going to go get some eye drops and whatever. And I remember it was like a couple days and I still had this double vision. And I was like, okay, this is getting kind of scary. Yeah. And I remember I sang a concert that night and I was like singing, it was fine. And I felt pretty calm when I was singing. And then I looked out into the audience and my family was there. And I looked out and I saw my dad sitting next to my dad. And I was like, hey, something's really wrong. And so I went to the emergency room.
And it was because sometimes like if you're tired or you stare at the sun a little too long, like you go a little blurry, you know, that Christmas lights effect. Is it that kind of thing where you can tell like, oh, that's my dad. And here's like a weird like reflecty version? Or is it a kind of like is it literal double? Like you're not sure which one's the real one.
It was like he was there and he was there and it was just so bizarre. And I could close my eyes and then I was like, okay, it's fine and it's fine. Sure. So I knew something was super wrong. So I went to the ER that night and you know, they were really, the thing that scared me the most is you go to the ER and, you know, it's not first come, first serve. It's, you know, what is the most urgent. I was in the back in like 6 minutes and I was like, oh crap.
That's not
this is bad.
So vision stuff is brain stuff, and brain stuff is serious.
Well, that's exactly it. And so they took me back, and they're doing CT scans, and they're phoning neurologists in Calgary, and it was a really scary night. Yeah. And I mean, long story short, within the course of 2 weeks, about 2 weeks, I got a diagnosis, which is really fast because a lot of people it takes years and years and years. And so after this diagnosis, I remember I was just sitting around and my teacher from university, who I had mentioned, she texted me out of nowhere and she's like, I'm thinking about you. Is everything okay? And I was like, actually, no, like this is happening to me right now. And so, you know, she just, I don't know, she's always like sensed these things. And so I remember I was just like, I was sitting in the bath and I was like, okay, oh, woe is me. That was the first little bit. It was just, you know, I want to cry and my life is over. And I didn't know anything about the disease. And so it seemed so scary.
Totally.
And I remember just going on Instagram and I'm just like, you know, looking up MS and I found this person who could sing and she had MS and she was writing songs about it. So then I started to do like a deep dive into like, okay, are there other people out there that are doing this? And so my master's project is actually... it's a research creation project, and I have interviews with people living with MS who are singers from all over the globe. And I've got this choral work that we're doing, and it's written by a composer who has MS, and he wrote it when he was going through his diagnosis. And so, I don't know, I felt like I had to take this terrible thing and do something, and that's how I ended up back at school. And so now I'm right back in the swing of music
and it was
again.
like the same day that she texted you.
Yeah, it was really weird.
So like,
it was really weird.
So all of a sudden, this just like immediate silver lining was like,
yeah.
Wow.
And so we went for lunch and we kind of just wrote up this sort of plan. And I mean, I didn't really know what the project would look like, but man, it's going to be cool.
Cool. So is MS something that can affect your vocal cords? Like, is it in a, you know, because I think about like ALS and things like that literally like paralyze you slowly, but I know MS, at least from what I've heard, kind of, it's that day-to-day thing, like it comes and goes.
Yeah.
So how does that impact your ability to sing or stamina or all of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it like I said, it's different for everybody. And some people, like, they will lose their ability to talk, or they are swallowing and choking. And like, there's so many different things that can happen. For me, luckily, it hasn't affected my vocal cords. I've been able to sing, but it's affecting my rib cage a lot of the time. Oh. So I'll get what is called an MS hug, and it feels like your rib cage is just being squeezed. And so for like 2 years of my master's, I had to relearn.
Breath control, you know.
Yeah.
Who needs
right?
it?
Like, it's only slightly important when you're a singer, right? So for 2 years, I had to take lessons, and in our lessons, it was challenging, but it was really cool because I had to kind of reteach my body how to work in this new way. And so I consider myself lucky. I still sing, I still teach. I'm really happy that I can do that. But it's kind of scary because you don't know. Like, I could wake up tomorrow and it could be gone. So.
And is that something where if it's gone, like, that's it? Is it like degenerative in that way, or is it just sort of a random like, oh, this is what's tight and spasmy now and it might go away? You know, does it come and go?
Well, for me, so I have relapse remitting. And so basically what that means is like, I'll have a flare and things will act up. And then typically for me, they'll calm down and they'll go away. So I'll have a symptom for a week and it'll be really bad. And then the next week I'm like, oh, okay, that's gone. But there's primary progressive MS and secondary progressive. So I mean, there are stages of it that get worse and worse. And so
interesting.
I mean, yeah, so it's really unpredictable. It's like a really just crazy disease, but
jeez.
Yeah.
Well, hey, welcome to a new chapter of all sorts of interesting challenges.
Right.
Wow. Well, and how cool that you've been able to, what's that phrase? You learn by doing, right? Like, there's stages of learning. You can sit and listen to a lecture, or you can do the thing, and that helps you learn, or you can teach the thing, which helps you learn. And I feel like how cool that you've been able to you've been able to learn about MS and its impacts on you, not only through living through it, but simultaneously immersing yourself into other people who have it, how they're dealing with it, and sort of your presentation of it is like the full spectrum of understanding. And, information is power. So that's pretty cool.
Totally. Yeah, it's been
very
great.
Cool. Good for you. Jeez, way to just like make lemonade out of some pretty crappy lemons.
Amen.
Like some real...
sour, bad lemons. We don't want those lemons.
Yeah. It takes a lot of sugar, but that's wow. Cool. So, I mean, I could just like nerd out about the music part all day. So, tell me about. Well, first of all, I'm curious about this friend of yours, Amanda. So, this is someone who sings in your choir.
Yes.
And who you guys connected kind of through the Stitch People community. Somehow someone was on someone's radar. That's pretty cool. So tell us a little bit about, I guess Amanda's my segue into crossing the bridge from music to Stitch People. So tell us about your cross-stitching. Has that been a part of your life as long as singing has, as long as music has? Or
not even close.
Where does that come in?
I started cross-stitching like a year and a half ago.
What?
And
You're fresh. I love it.
Like a baby, like really fresh. So it kind of ties into the whole like diagnosis thing. So when I got diagnosed, it's kind of that thing where I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what my body's going to be able to do tomorrow, so I'm going to do what I can right now. And I actually started out by building lots of Lego sets because I wanted to keep my hands busy and I wanted to keep myself like just constantly doing things and working my brain and my body.
Totally.
that gets really expensive after you build the whole Lego city. And I was like, okay, this is not a sustainable habit for me for the rest of time. So I
and
was
also, like, what do you do with a Lego city?
Exactly.
You need like a Lego room.
It's really bad. I have like this shelf and I look at it and I'm like, I don't need this police station on my shelf. Like,
fun project though.
Right. It was cute. It was great. But so I was just thinking one day, I was like, I need something else that I can do to kind of keep myself busy. Yeah. And I don't know why I wanted to cross stitch, but I went to Michael's and I was like, okay, I'm going to just do a craft. I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
And I picked up one of their little basic kits and it was a slice of pizza.
Fun.
And so I was like, okay, I'll do this. And I'm doing it. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I went back like 2 days later and I got a little donut. And then I went back and I got a llama. And I was like, okay, I think I might be okay at this. You know, it was something that I was like, this kind of makes sense to me.
And like not bored yet.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm the type of person that like, if I find something I love, I kind of hyper fixate on it for a while.
Awesome.
And so I'm just going down the Instagram rabbit hole of cross stitching and I'm seeing all these projects, these amazing things. And I saw a Stitch People portrait.
Cool.
And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't know Stitch People was a thing. So I'm like, oh, that's really neat. So I took a picture of it and I zoomed in and I was like counting all of them. And I was like, okay, I could probably do that. So I got out some graph paper and I actually just kind of copied the body shape. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. So I decided to make a portrait for my grandma whose husband had passed away like a while back now. But there's this picture that I have of them and it's just the cutest little picture. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to practice. I'm going to do this one.
Oh, that's nice.
So I made that for her and I gave it to her and she's just like, got so emotional when she saw it. She was just like so moved. And then I'm like going back. I was like, okay, are there more of these in the world? And I'm looking. And then I was like, oh, there's a Stitch People Instagram. This is like a real thing. And like, you better believe I bought every book that was available. So I just like, because I don't know, it was like something that I was like, okay, this is so like personal. Like you can just, I don't know, there's just something about it. And so I got the Stitch People book and like, I swear I take it with me everywhere. Like it's tattered because I just like have it all the time.
I love that.
And I have the weddings and the floral motifs and I got all the Christmas and the farm animals and everything. And I don't know, it's just something that I started to do. And I think the cross stitching was great and I loved using the kits, but to be able to actually then kind of put my own spin on things was just so cool. So
yeah. And especially like you said, just having something more meaningful. I think it's nice. It's not only on the receiving end where like don't get me wrong, if somebody gave me a hand cross-stitched pizza or donut, like I'd of course, that's hilarious. Right? It's amazing. But on the receiving end, it's so much more personal to get, oh my gosh, that's me. But then there's also more care when you're doing it because you want to, it's not just getting it just right because the pattern says so, it's getting it just right because it's grandma or getting it just right because it's your little fur baby or, you know, whatever. And so it almost engages like yet another part of your brain. It's not just craft execution, following instructions, but it's incorporating memories or ideas and personalizations that are just totally unique. So that's so fun.
It's amazing.
Well, I'm a fan that you're such a fan. That's awesome. Thank you.
Such a fan.
I'm so glad. Hopefully it saved you some time. That's the thing. It's one of those, my brain works very much like yours, where if I see an idea, like I almost don't think like, oh, where are the instructions? Like I'll just jump in and figure out like how to do my version of it. And it took a while for it to dawn on me that like, oh, some people really like to have instructions and help. And because Spencer encouraged me to do the DIY book for a long time before I was like, no, I was like, people can figure it out. And he's like, no, you've stitched hundreds of these. You probably have like a lot of tips you can share. I was like, oh, okay. And then it never, I mean, I think I even said in another podcast this season of like, it never occurred to me that there would be more than the DIY book. Like I thought like, oh, here's how to do it. Have fun, everybody. See ya. You know?
Right, totally.
And like here we are 10 years later, like you said, with the florals and the weddings and like it just because you can use it for so many things and there's so many customizations and there's so many options and it just really helps to have a foundation to go off of and not have to like totally go from scratch, which is
for sure.
You know.
Well, kind of actually a cool story. So I have a friend who we went to music school together and she's a teacher now at a junior high. And she, you know, she sees my Instagram and she's like, she teaches a handcraft class at school, which
fun.
I think is amazing.
That's so
and so
cool.
she said, would you come in and show them how to cross stitch? And I was like, dude, I've been doing this for like 5 minutes. Like, I am not, I don't know what to do. So I actually sent a message to Stitch People.
That's
and I said, would it be okay if I, just made a little blank pattern? And so I went to this junior high and I gave each kid a blank Stitch body.
Yeah.
And their assignment for that class was to create themselves. And so we spent one class kind of filling in the project, and then I came back like 3 weeks later and they were all done. And the stuff that I saw from that class was like so incredible. Like, this little girl was
cool.
like in a swim cap because she was a competitive swimmer. And then there was someone who did like a big birthday cake, and like they were so creative with what they made.
Cool.
And it was so cool. And my friend was like, okay, so this is like a real deal. And I was like, you got to go online and get all of this stuff. And like in that class, she's like ordering everything for the school,
fun.
and they have it as like a textbook now. And like, it's so cool. Like,
well, it's such a great way to take that. It's such like an old school craft, but to make it fun and pertinent, just to like
totally
a 2023 kid instead
exactly.
of like a 1980s kid,
exactly.
Or a 1600s kid even.
Yeah.
It's just like we don't need to stitch like formal florals anymore
right.
if you don't want to. There was somebody even just posted on Instagram the other day. How some people do like the perler bead version using the patterns, and they'll do it the little beads and just to even change up the medium ever so slightly makes it feel a little fun, a little different, and you can make a little magnet or it's just you can use it for a lot. I love that. Yeah. I love that. Teach the children to stitch. That's so great.
It was really cool.
And it's cool that they got into it. That's always rewarding.
They loved it. Like, it was so cool to see them. They kept running up and they were like, can you find me a braid in the book? Can you show me what it would look like if I had pigtails? So we're just like furiously going through the book, and they were just so excited that they could make something that was just 100% them.
Yeah.
Like, it was really cool to see that, because like all these little young minds were just like so excited to make this. So
fun.
It was pretty cool.
I love that. Well, hey, if anybody is doing school programs or after school programs, send us an email and, we'll figure out what we can do. Because, there's definitely, especially now we have our Stitch People Basics and like workbook that has like kind of fill-inable templates that are a little bit easier. So, we'll work together. That's really fun. That's great.
Yeah.
So what does your day look like as far as like, especially insofar as crafting is concerned? Are you stitching every day? Do you stitch in bursts, where you'll pick it up and do something big and then take a break? What's your crafty routine like?
It kind of depends on like the day job situation. So right now, not stitching as much. I wish I was, but like in the summertime when I've got time off, I will sit and stitch for like 6 to 8 hours a day. Like, I love it. Like, I'm a pretty anxious, fidgety person, and so for me to be able to sit down and like not have to scroll through my phone and not have to worry about things and really have something to focus on, I think is like so important to me.
Yeah.
And so I've got a few things that I'm like kind of making right now, but it's just when I can get to them.
Sure.
But honestly, when I sit down to stitch, that's the happy place. That's it.
I love that. So are you, I feel like a lot of people can relate with, anxieties or fidgetiness. Do you feel like cross-stitching is a place to channel that? Or do you feel like cross-stitching is a means by which you actually can kind of like calm down and take a breath? Because both are great.
Yeah.
There's no right answer, but I'm just curious kind of like how that helps you and, which end of that spectrum.
I think for me, it really helps to calm me, because I think it gives me, I know when I sit down, I know what I'm trying to achieve. And it's so delicate and it's so intricate. And so it's like, my brain is just right there, and I stop worrying about this or what I have to do tomorrow or, what I said 15 years ago, and so it's like I sit and I can just like, I'll put on music or a movie or whatever, and I can just get in the zone. So for me, it's really calming. Like, it's a form of like self-care for me almost.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love that. 100%. I totally agree. It requires presence. I think that's in today's day and age, you hear a lot about mindfulness and this kind of stuff and ways people can meditate or whatnot. And I feel like it's exactly what you just said, because whether you're following your own pattern or a different pattern, heck, even if you're just kind of freestyling, you still have to aim, right? You're aiming your needle. You have to make these very precise little shapes. You can't, you can't not pay attention. And so it's really easy to focus one's thoughts and bring just like immediate presence. I sometimes get that feeling. I don't know if it ever happens to you, but like, I don't even know what'll trigger it throughout the day. And it doesn't even happen every day, but it feels like all of a sudden things are crispier or in like more 3D than usual. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm just like really present right now, where everything just feels, your mind isn't wandering 1,000 places at once. Like you said, thinking about something you said 15 years ago. Can relate.
Totally.
And cross stitch kind of forces you into that. Any kind of crafting, I think, generally.
Yeah.
But especially one where your mind can't really wander as much, because even if you're working on a big swatch of color, say a big sky background or something like that, like there's still a boundary that you can't cross. And there's still, after a couple rows, you're going to have to start counting, because there's going to be a tree or a person or something, like you can only zone out so far for so long. So yeah, I mean, I think it definitely focuses the mind in a really calming way. At least it can.
Totally. Sure. And I think we live in a society where we want everything right now. And you can't have that thing finished right now. You have to sit and you have to stitch all those little X's. And so it's like, it's almost like, it's a way that I've kind of rewired my brain to think like, okay, there is actually something that I have to really work towards, and I have to just keep going, and I have to keep coming back to it. That's the thing that I like too. Like I can put it away and then I kind of know that it's waiting for me, and I can come back to that place of kind of calm and patience. And so it's like
forced delayed gratification.
Yeah, I like that.
But like in a good way, not like a weird withholding way, but just like in a slow and steady wins the race kind of way. Totally. Which is probably really healthy. And like you said, in our time, it's things are very instant. Yeah. To our detriment, probably.
I think so. Sometimes, yeah.
Attention spans and just expectations. Everybody, 2-day shipping or bust. It's just we're all used to that. Wow, cool. So, what projects are you working on? And I'm curious if you've been in this like a year and a half. Have you gone like whole hog and made like dozens of portraits, or has it just been a handful? Tell us what's your what's your scorecard like a little bit as far as portraits go?
I'm close to like 20 portraits that I've made. Oh my gosh! Yeah,
in just a year and a half.
Yeah,
I'm so impressed.
I'm telling you, when I hyperfixate.
Fair.
Yeah. So like the first one I posted on just like my personal Instagram, and somebody was like, "Oh, could you make me?" And I was like, "Yeah, probably." And then it just kind of like it spiraled, and so it was like really cool. And I mean, right now I'm not working. I have one that I will be doing in a little bit, but I'm working right now. I got a pattern off of Etsy, and it's like a golden retriever for cute. Somebody who's golden retriever. They wanted like a realistic. Yeah. So I was like, oh, sure. So I'm kind of doing like just little other things right now, but I've got a couple probably in the next like month or so that I'll get started on. So
cool. Yeah. Are you mostly gifting them, or are you starting to charge for them? Are you going to make a little business out of it? What's your plan there?
Well, I started off by gifting them, and then there was a few people that were like, no, like just take something for it. Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, sure. Nice. So I've sold a few of them, cool. And I was like, okay, this could be something. And like we have some pretty incredible like craft markets and handmade markets in the area. And so I was like, okay, like this could be something that I could do.
What a
like,
great opportunity.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and those kinds of places too, it's like people get creative with having, obviously you can't just like spit out a custom portrait there on the spot, but you can have order forms, you can have cards, you can have information. People could put a down payment on one to, pay the rest later when you have the capacity, or, work out the details later. So I think a lot of people get nervous about, especially in-person events, and like, oh, how would I do those orders? But if you're just if you have some good imagery and people understand what the deal is, that's a great way to get the word out and get some more portraits lined up.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Very cool. Yeah. Keep us in the loop. Let us know. Make sure to send us a message if you're, opening up a store or something. That's very, very fun. Very cool. I like the, I feel like there's it's like one of the Stitch People values is this idea of just gumption, people kind of jumping in, taking the reins. It's always very exciting to me to see like the excitement and empowerment that people feel of like, oh no, I like you literally just said like, oh, I can do this. Like, could I stitch you? Probably. Like it's definitely a confidence booster, and it's like I don't know. It's very exciting for me to watch that wake up in other people. I just love that part of like human creativity is like kind of that can-do attitude.
Yeah.
Is really fun.
It's just, it kind of feels like the opportunities with this are like really endless.
Totally.
Like, because you start with nothing. You really start, you start with a picture of someone and you're like, okay, well, I have to make this out of thin air for you, you know? So it's like, it's completely creative, which is so cool. Like from the beginning process, when you're drawing up a pattern to when you've stitched it, to when you gift it, like, it's just, I don't know. It's just amazing.
But there you go. You're like preaching the good word of Stitch People. I love that. It is. And every single person's unique. Every single portrait's unique, which I think is inherently cool that like no two portraits will ever be the same. No. Even, like I know our Stitch People ambassador, Giselle, she was commissioned to do like 3 of the same portrait. It was, I think someone had passed and they wanted like the person who had passed with person A and the person who had passed with person B and the person who passed with person C. And so she had to stitch the same person a few times, but even very like super subtle, but if you knew to look for it, differences, even in what would quote unquote be the same pattern, you know, just little details here or there that laid a little differently or turned out a little differently, just the inherent nature of a handmade thing, which I'm still also, it's like, I think all schools need to have a handmade class. That's so cool. Again, just in our time, we're so trained for this instant gratification, but just the quality, the energy, the skills that handmade goods of any kind take are totally worth digging into and passing on. I absolutely adore that. So with your background, you're clearly very creative, very musical. What do you like to do while you stitch? Is this like a zen, quiet bubble time? Or do you like to watch shows or movies, audiobooks, podcasts, music? What's your go-to?
It's usually Netflix. And like, I don't know, I stitch really well to like true crime. I don't know.
Well, there's a through line, right? There's like something it's not just like reality TV chaos or something. Like there's an inciting incident and then discovery clues.
Yes.
What kinds of true crime appeal to you? What are your go-tos?
Oh, what was the one I don't even remember. It's called something like I Am a Murderer. Like it's like really like
it's like interviews.
Have you seen it? Yeah, it's like the interviews with the people.
I feel like it's on my watch list. I haven't started, but they interview people who have been convicted of crimes and like
it's really interesting and like it's easy to listen to and then I can kind of check in and be like, oh, that's what you look like, and then go back to it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. I always have something on that I can listen to because I think if my brain, if things are too quiet for me, I just don't think I don't function. So I have to have a little bit of that chaos going on. So I'll listen to
you just tapped into it. Just I got the realization why I think a lot of people do listen to true crime or crime podcasts, especially while stitching. It's exactly what you just said. You don't have to watch it. The way crime shows and police shows are written, they always lay it out for you where, like, even if it's like a close-up of a weapon that they find, they'll be like, oh, is that the murder weapon? Yes, it's the knife they used to da-da-da-da. Like, you can, they tell you the story so you don't have to have your eyes glued to the screen, like, as if you were in some, you know, very artsy film or something where like you really have to watch it to see what's going on. But yeah, no, crime, they really spell it out for you as they go, like, which is good. I mean, that's the nature of the thing because we're not all detectives, so we don't always know what's going on. But yeah, it's kind of a listening medium of entertainment. Yeah, very interesting. I like that. Yeah, I wonder what our collective fascination is with the true crime stuff lately. I feel like that's really taken off over the last few years.
It's huge right now.
Yeah.
It's a worldwide obsession.
Yeah. It's like morbidly
Which is kind of weird. I'm like, ugh,
right.
What's wrong with all of us?
Right. And there's part of me that's like, maybe we shouldn't talk about it because you don't want to give like people ideas. But at the same time, there is something fascinating to like that part of humanity that like, I think is all, like we all have like these weird primal instincts buried deep in our lizard brains that like, I don't know. You just wonder, how do people get, well, and that's what I think is fascinating maybe about that I Am a Murderer show is like, how do you get from A to Z? You know what I mean? Like, how do you become just like somebody's kid who went to elementary school to like a fully fledged adult to, oh, okay, now you're in jail convicted of a major crime. Yeah. Like that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
What have you found, What do you think appeals to you? Do you like the chase? Do you like the clues? Do you like the resolution of crime stories?
I'm interested in like the backstories of the people, actually. Sure. And just hearing, because I think their stories are very sad, like a lot of these people have had terrible lives, and it's just interesting to see kind of another part of the world and how some people unfortunately live, and so I mean I get invested in the stories of how did they, like you said, how did they become that,
right
so
being part of a ultimately a system that kind of failed them, there's always outliers and just like it doesn't. We do our best for the majority of people, I think, like a public school system is for like your average learner. And it's like sometimes those high achievers or the low achievers kind of get by the wayside because it's like, well, it's meant for the most of us to succeed, the average Joes, so it's like, it's hard to account for that. And I like what you said, just the stories behind it. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. So I'm curious, like I said, I could nerd out about the music stuff all the time. When I went to music school, I totally burned out. I almost couldn't even listen to, that's when I actually first got into NPR and talk radio, was after I graduated, I was like, I can't listen to music because I had switched, I started in trombone performance, but I switched my emphasis to commercial music. So I did a lot of like songwriting, film scoring, things like this. So now listening to popular music, there's all these rules in my head for like what makes good lyrics and good stories for pop songs and like chord changes, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't not analyze, frankly, how terrible most popular music is these days. So do you listen to a lot of music? Did you ever get burnt out for music? If not, I'm curious why or why not. Like, tell me a little bit about your music consumption as a person who does music professionally.
Yeah. Okay. That's so interesting that you say that you're like analyzing everything you listen to. I'm exactly the same way. I had a student in my studio the other night and she was singing one of her musical theater pieces and she gave me goosebumps. And I was like, I stopped and I was like, okay, this is a big moment. She's like, why? I was like, I have goosebumps. She's like, okay, so I did okay. And I was like, yes, but hear me out. I was like, I am so overly critical now that it's hard for me to be moved by things. Yeah. And it's kind of, it's kind of sad. Bar. It's kind of sad actually, because like, I mean, you want to just go and like let yourself really just be immersed in everything. But exactly like what you're saying, like, it's easier for me to be like, oh, that was flat. Oh, that was the wrong note. Oh, that rhythm was, like it's when you,
what's that phrase? You know how the sausage gets made. It's a little harder to enjoy it. Like, you know what's technically speaking supposed to be happening. And that's very interesting.
And like, for like, I listen to music all the time. But people are like, oh, you must listen to opera. I'm like, I never listen to opera. Because it's like, to me, it feels like, okay, when that's the job, I need a break from it. So I will listen to like 90s pop like it is 1993. Like that is where I'm at.
That's like saying to an accountant, like, you must go home and run numbers.
That's like, right. That's exactly right. And people seem shocked when I'm like, oh, I don't really listen to that on my off time. Yeah. I like it. I appreciate it. I know it's great. Sometimes I'm in the mood for it, but I don't go home and I'm like, okay, I need opera right now.
Give me that Puccini.
Right.
Put it on.
It's loud. So it's interesting. Like I think taking a break from it for such a long time, like I've had a lot of opportunity to do like more community music and work with people who are like not necessarily trained. Sure. And I think that's kind of brought back a real human aspect to music for me. And it's given me this sense of appreciation for people that like, they don't know the rules and it's okay. And so it's really, I don't know, it's kind of opened my eyes. And then being back doing this master's project, like I'm talking to people from around the world who, they're classically trained or they've never taken a lesson in their life or they do it because they were in a church choir or whatever. So I'm starting to kind of like regain an appreciation for just what people are willing to give with their music as opposed to what is right, what is wrong, so it's
so interesting.
It's been cool.
I'm curious to dig into that a little more. Like what, because it's people, there's an inherent drive to make music. People hum, people whistle, people sing, people dance to music. There's every culture across all of history and time and space has had music involved in some way. And they didn't know the rules 100,000 years ago, but they beat the drums and danced to it anyway. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, I don't know, what else is there to that of just kind of like you said, it's not that you're unlearning the things that you know, but sort of able to relax the expectations maybe?
Yeah.
What do you think overrides that expectation or that technicality?
Well, I think of a moment. I was in one of the choirs that I sing in, and I have a friend, and she has MS. She's part of my project, and she's in that group. And we started to sing this piece, and she's just like sitting there, and she's like reading the text, and she just like started to cry. Aww. And she was just so moved by the music, and it didn't like we were reading the piece for the first time. It's not like this was a performance. Nobody was ready to do it, and I just kind of in that moment realized, okay, there's way more to this than being perfect or performance ready or, at that end stage of something. Like there's so much to experience with each step. And I think if you really remember that, like each person that is singing or making music, like it is coming from their souls. It really is. Like if you kind of just let go of all that perfectionism and just like let people feel something, it's so much more moving than a robotic and perfect performance, So, right. Yeah.
Well, and I hope it's not lost on anyone listening that the exact same thing could be said for cross-stitching, because a lot of people feel, they'll go down the Instagram rabbit holes of Stitch People portraits and see there's a lot of people doing really cool stuff with their portraits, and it can get very complex and very big and very full, backgrounds and all these elements, the real hair techniques. Oh my gosh, the patterns, clothes, the furry animals. And people sometimes will stop themselves or not want to post because they just feel like they're not as good. But like you said, there's so much more to self-expression in any creative medium, and not just music, that you get along the way from the inception of the idea. A friend of mine just told me just last night that she's been listening to a podcast. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. The Atomic Habits podcast. Yeah. And the research shows that you get as much dopamine released in your brain when you have a good idea. Like when you come up, what if I wrote a story about, or, what I could do in my kitchen, or, that have the genesis of an idea, and that little brainstorm of wouldn't it be cool if releases as much dopamine as actually doing the project itself. And that's why a lot of times people, good intentions, fun ideas, people always have all these great ideas but don't always necessarily execute. It's because your brain's already satisfied. So maybe all you do for a while is just plan your portraits and design them, and the idea of doing them is a creative fulfillment. That's okay, just singing through a song for the first time. It's not performance ready, but you're just trying out a new piece. That's really cool. And then, maybe you start working on your portrait. Maybe you tackle a new stitch you've never tried. And then you kind of get performance ready, if you will. And you add embellishments and you maybe start selling them. But that you don't necessarily have to hold yourself to what you perceive as the ultimate standard. That there's we value along the way. Joy in the journey, as they say.
People seem so quick to apologize for being wrong, and it's just allow yourself to be wrong, allow yourself to screw up, allow yourself to just kind of feel or create or just make something happen. And if it's not
always
perfect,
wrong, it's oftentimes just new.
Totally,
beginner level. It's not wrong. It's just a little clunky because it's new, which is what else would you expect?
Exactly. It's just just accepting imperfection and just letting it be something really beautiful.
Yeah. Geez. And I feel we're sort of coming full circle too, because I feel like your health stuff, these circumstances, you've likely had to do a lot. I would imagine you've had to do a lot of acceptance that you're not always going to be able to get a perfect result. Tell me how does that relate to what you've been going through health-wise? Because you're just have to, curveballs is the new normal for you, right?
It's funny that you say that. So I and a few of my friends that have MS, we we will talk about things that happen to us and we'll start laughing because to us it's like, okay, ha ha ha, that happened to you too. And people get so uncomfortable. They're like, they're scared to kind of even listen. They're scared to laugh with you. And you're like, no, you have permission. Like if we're telling you this is like, for example, this morning, like you're saying, okay, getting over hurdles or whatever, my foot just like stopped working and I just like fell across my room. And like, I was on the floor, like laughing. I was like, hey, that was great. Like, I wish someone would have seen that, you know? And so it's like, it's not ideal, but I guess if you can kind of, I don't know, just accept that like bad stuff is going to happen, you know? Yeah. But it's like, it's just the way that you, I don't know, it's the outlook. And it's for me, it took a long time. Yeah. It wasn't overnight. It was months and months and months of me feeling sorry for myself until one day I was like, which is also
okay. You know, that's
totally.
Part of it.
Yeah, of course.
Arguably
it's so
healthy
justified.
When expectations fail to meet reality in such a massive way that your entire future is completely different than you thought it would be. Like, feel bad for yourself for a while. That's okay.
Yeah. And I do still have those days where I feel bad for myself and I'm like, oh, why do I have to go through this and whatever. But I don't know. I just think I almost just had to make the decision to just kind of be like, okay, well, I'm not going to let stuff stress me out. Yeah. I'm gonna, there was a real life shift for me having to realize like, okay, I don't have time for that. I'm not gonna let that stress me out. That's not important. And kind of like figuring out what in my life was like top tier. And those are the things that I really focus on now. And everything else is kind of like, okay, I'll get to it when I get to it. And so
I love that. Yeah. That's such good advice too. A lot of times I think people fail to like, I just ask the question kind of why, like, what's the point? And like, for example, I have, actually it's sitting right here in front of me. I'm planting a garden and I wrote these little cards that have like the month on them. And then I wrote out like the dates, like, so this one's the February card. And then it says February, like 11th through 17th. And I labeled it like 11 weeks to the last frost, 10 weeks to the last frost, just so I can time like my seeds or whatever. And the cards look really crappy. My handwriting's totally scribbly. And as I was doing them for myself, I was like, oh, I should probably redo these. And that was my first instinct is like, I should redo them so they're like cuter and cleaner and prettier. And I stopped myself and I was like, what's the point of these cards? To sit in a little box and help me reference my planting times. Is that information here? Yes. Is it the prettiest? No, but the pretty is not the point. So like I had to force myself, because a couple of them I like miswrote and I had to scribble out and write again. And like I just left it. And that was huge. Like it's such a minor thing, but such a weird little huge step in my brain of like, it doesn't have to look perfect because the purpose has been served. The purpose is that I have quick access to that information, how many weeks until the frost, so I can plant my stinking seeds. The end. Like the point is not to look pretty. So similarly, whether that's your laundry and your chores list, or if that's, a rehearsal, if that's a Stitch People portrait, if you just quickly pause to ask yourself, like, what's the point of this? Oh, it's to give my grandma a gift. Oh, then I can let myself off the hook on this being the most perfect, like huge, most complicated portrait of my life. My grandma's going to like it because it's me and her. Like, if that's the point, great. Simplify, take some stress off your plate and focus on kind of the why. Just take a minute to assess the why and let that be enough, because then it'll be easy. Yeah, like you said, I love that you like fell on the floor and laughed. Yeah. It's like, well, there we are. What's important right now? This ain't it. Let's just laugh. I'm curious, what you said something too that, like you said, it makes people uncomfortable to talk about. This is interesting. I read an article literally like 2 days ago about a man, tragic, terrible story. He was in a car accident with his family. He and his wife survived, but their 2 teenage daughters didn't. And like horrible, horrible tragedy. And he's done all this research and writing now about grief because of exactly what you just said. He said that their horrible situation made everyone around them uncomfortable to the point where they actually weren't able to like process their grief because it was like inconvenient for other people. And that he said that the phrase they would hear a lot is like, oh, there are no words, there are no words, which he's like, I understand why people say that. Cause like, what do you say? What do you say in a situation like that? But at the same time, that's like a weird, like fail-safe cutting off of the conversation. It's like, I don't know what to say. There are no words. Well, that's the end of that. So from your perspective, I mean, you didn't necessarily suffer like a family loss, but you've got like future loss. You've got like capacity loss. Like it's a major, I'm sure there was a ton of grief that you've had to process and probably comes up all the time. So as someone, when you're diagnosed with something that's life altering, what advice would you have for friends and family of people going through that? Like, what do you wish people asked you? What do you wish people were open to in a conversation about?
Such a good question. I love that. I think like some people are more private than others. I'm such an oversharer. I'll tell you everything. But you know, I think like you understand me. I'll tell you every detail of my life. But I think, you know, in the beginning, like there were the people that were just too like afraid that they were going to hurt my feelings or too afraid that they were going to upset me. And like newsflash, I was really upset. Like I was already in it. I was already there. So just to have someone reach out and even just say, you know, I see what you're going through and I don't understand it, but if you want to discuss it, please, I'm here. It's just to have someone with the capacity to listen. I think that's what people need. And it's if someone wants to share, you know? Sure. Because there are other people that, like you can't feel entitled to that person's experience, but you have to just say, I'm here if you want to let me in. And I think that's so important, is just allowing people, you know, the space to share what they can or what they want to, or, you know, and just creating sort of, I don't know, a safe space for somebody to just come when they need you. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's almost, that reminds me of, weirdly, it reminds me of some like improv training, like in improvisation with acting or improv comedy. It's almost exactly what you just said, of sort of like opening and inviting, and the phrase is always yes and. You hear that in improv, and what that means for the people who don't know is like, if we show up and we start inventing a scene on the fly, and I go, oh my gosh, Grandma, it's so good to see you, and I've just introduced you as Grandma, like, because that's what I picked out of thin air. Yes, and would be for you to continue that scene like, oh, sweetheart, it's just been so long since I've seen you. Instead of saying, what? I'm not your grandma. I'm your elementary school teacher. And all of a sudden it's like, well, you just killed that scene, right? So like immediate denial. But that concept of like, yes, and I think that's one thing that it's something I've really tried to practice in my life. And I'm curious how you've experienced it, kind of being as the sharer, when you have a sharee who is open to listen and is just sort of open to what you might share or not. Like you might laugh. I think it would catch people off guard that you would laugh about your foot not working. And then people would be like, oh, can I laugh about that with you? That is kind of funny. You fell over. Ha ha. But I don't want you to feel bad, but I don't know. But that's a little improv-y to just like take those cues, like, oh, you're laughing. We're laughing. Let us laugh together. Ha 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 ha. You know, yes, and. Yeah. And also you're sad about it. And also it's hard. And also we can, you know, to just be open. It's scary to not be in control of a conversation or situation. And a lot of people put expectations on what they think someone's going to say or do. But if you're just kind of open and you yes and it, it's like, oh, we're crying together now. Okay, yes, let's cry together. Oh, we're laughing together now. Yes, that's okay too, you know? That's really interesting advice of just sort of opening that door. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like the examples that you gave. It was just like, hey, if you need someone to talk to, you know, with no expectation, and not feeling bad if they don't take you up on it too. Well, because some people are more private.
It's nice too when people admit that they don't know what you're going through, you know, because you will get those people that, I mean, especially with like MS, it's a joke in our community. People will be like, oh, well, have you tried yoga? Oh, have you gone gluten-free? Oh, have you done this? There's people want to solve the problem all the time. Sure. People want to fix you. People want to do that stuff. So for somebody to come up to me like, I know nothing about this. Are you good? I'm like, that's what I want. I want you to just say like, I know nothing. Like, you know, and it's not necessarily my job to like educate someone about it, but I know that if someone's like, okay, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm not going to tell you to like eat more broccoli, but I'm here if you want to call or cry or laugh or whatever. Or ask.
Totally. Be like, is this the kind of thing that like yoga might help? Or, or is that just futile? Like, you know, what is this a thing that's diet? Does diet affect that? You know, just being curious instead of imposing a point of view or something. Yeah, that's I love that. Just admitting that you don't know everything. Man, I feel like the world's problems could be solved if people could more freely admit the things they don't know.
Wouldn't it be great?
Wouldn't it be great? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that is ultimately the meaning of like, there's no stupid questions, which also ties into what we were talking about before of like, what's wrong with being a beginner? Like, why? It's like I said at the beginning, like, here's what I think MS is. Like, I've heard of it. I know people who know people who have it. I don't have it. So like, is this what it is? You know, that why would I know? I don't have it. Nobody in my family has it. And that's okay. Like, it's just not part of my world right now. And and that's okay. So it's okay to be curious about things that are part of people's other worlds that aren't part of yours, And it doesn't make you stupid.
I think it's always okay to ask too. Like, totally. And I mean, everybody's different, but for me, like, if somebody wants to know, I'll tell them. I'll just be like, this is what happens to me, and this is my story, and blah blah. Like, it's nice to just like let the person experiencing something educate instead of making assumptions and trying to fix them, and so. And
being open to, if you ask a question that they might not want to answer. That's just being open to somebody being like, oh, I don't really like to talk about it, and just to let that be okay. Doesn't have to make it weird. That it's just is what it is.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh man, you're just like helping us all cope with the world. So
I don't know about that.
I can't believe we're already almost an hour in, but before we get past it, I like to do the rapid fire questions. So tell us, so true crime is probably your favorite story genre. Would you say it's your favorite, or is it just favorite while stitching?
It's kind of my favorite thing while stitching. I'm a real reality TV gal too.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Do you have a favorite show of all time that's like your go-to?
Favorite show of all time.
Some people are like diehard favorite shows. Some people it's too hard a question.
Sex in the City. Sex in the City. I can revisit that every day. Yep.
That's one that I've like seen some episodes, but I've never really like watched through. So it's one of the few like big classics that we've not tackled yet. So Sex in the City. Okay. And do you have do you have a favorite color, just generally?
Orange.
I'm an orange gal too.
Yeah.
Orange and ambers. It's very rare. That's what I'm excited. I love it. And do you have a favorite color you like to stitch with? Like, is there a certain kind of floss that when it comes around, you're like, ooh, love that lavender?
Okay. I wouldn't say I have a certain color that I love to stitch with, but I do something weird, and I actually have I'm in my office and I have it with me. If I'm having a weird day or an off day or whatever, I will go somewhere and I will pick a color based on what I'm feeling, and I'll just buy it. And if I'm in a craft store with someone, I will say, okay, can you select 2 colors that make you happy? And I'll just buy it and I'll put it in my collection. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily what I love to stitch with, but I'll look into my thing and I'll be like, oh yeah, that was the color that so-and-so picked on that day.
That's a really fun idea.
It's cool. I don't know, I've always done it. I'm like, okay, just pick one that makes you happy. We're in a rush. Let's go. Grab one. And then and they instantly grab something they're drawn to. Yeah. And so, I don't know. That's my color answer.
That's a great answer. And whether you do nothing with it, whether you have a project or just have it as a little box of memories, that's a really fun way to connect with people. I really like that. How about travel? What is your favorite place you've ever visited?
My favorite place I've ever visited, I have to say Lucca, Italy. It's this little town that had this big wall around it. And when I went, I was like 16 when I went there. It was a long time ago, but like there were no cars in there. It was just bikes, and it was really old, and old outdoor markets, and it was beautiful.
That sounds entirely romantic. I'm sold. And do you have a bucket list travel destination that you want to go next that you haven't
Tokyo. Ooh. I want to go to Japan so badly. I collect Blythe dolls, which are really big in Tokyo. That's a story for a whole other day. They're really weird. But I would love to go to Tokyo. That's my place. Yeah.
I love how fast and confident that answer was. That's great.
Yep.
How about seasons? Do you have a favorite season? Spring, summer, fall, winter?
Spring.
Okay. It is getting to be your time of year.
Just spring.
I've noticed a little bulb is like poking out in my front, and I was like, oh no, it's probably a little soon, but also yay.
I know.
Because it's like just warming up. So that's really exciting.
I know.
How about this? Would you say, if you had given the choice, are you a beach person or like a mountains forest person?
I would say mountains forest person, not on the coldest day of the year.
For sure.
Like in the middle of that sort of temperature spectrum, I'm going to take like a sort of warm mountain. Fair. We like a lakey, foresty mountain environment. Yes, there you go.
Comfortable temperature.
Yes.
Love that. How about foods? Do you have a favorite meal? And like any favorite snack, favorite meal, favorite treat, favorite dessert? Is there any kind of food that you gravitate towards?
Okay, this is kind of a joke between me and my friends, but I will text people a picture of a perfectly seasoned Dorito.
Ooh.
And that, I'll send a picture. I'll be like, this is the one.
Chip to seasoning ratio is very important.
So I'm just going to go with that answer. We'll leave it at that.
What flavor? Flavor Doritos?
The jalapeno cheddar or just the plain nacho. Just the originals. But if it's seasoned well, like my whole contact list gets a picture. It's really, it's too much.
That's amazing. There it is. I think what a great note to end on.
Sure.
Jaimee, since you are still sort of fresh in the Stitch people in the community, what would you say to new stitchers? What advice would you have for people who are nervous or overwhelmed or kind of don't know where to start?
I think, how do I word this? I don't know. Just be brave. Just let yourself play with colors and let yourself design something and let yourself do it wrong. Because guess what? You can fix it, or you can redo it, or you can change it. You can, just be brave about your choices. And I think just really, go with your gut feeling. If you feel like this is how it needs to look, just try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Just try it. Be brave.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Jaimee, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
I am on Instagram. It is at JamJarStitch.
Stitch. Awesome.
Yeah.
And we will link to that in show notes in the blog post.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for your time today. It's so fun to get to know you and learn about it was really cool stuff. I mean, you've been thrown in the deep end and you are swimming. You're doing it. You're staying afloat. It's pretty cool. And I don't know. I feel like I'm always grateful to have conversations with people who've been through hard things and have a good perspective, especially to help people who know people. How it's that's life. It's human connection and support and relationships, and it's always good to get insight into how we can better support each other. So thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you, my friends, for listening to this episode of the Stitch People podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I really love conversations like this. They go, far and wide and high and low, and it's always so interesting to kind of like Jaimee was saying about, the true crime podcast, where you see perspectives that are different from yours. You see how people's lives are different from yours and just how valuable that can be. And to look at someone like Jaimee and see how she's been able to keep her tenacity even in the face of challenges. So cool. Thank you so much, Jaimee. And thanks to all of you for listening. Thank you for your support of Stitch People. Thank you for your participation in the Stitch People community, making it the happiest place on the internet. It's all because of each and every one of you. And we really appreciate you. And always a big thank you to our Stitch People team for making the magic happen behind the scenes. Our music is by Jonathan Boyle, and our sound designer extraordinaire is Brandon Yost, and I thank you all for listening. Hope you have a wonderful day, and happy stitching. Hey Stitch People, as a way to say thank you for listening to this podcast, we have made a special discount just for you. If you go to stitchpeople.com and order anything, use the code podcast10 at checkout. That's PODCAST10 at checkout to get 10% off your order as a way to say thanks. We sure appreciate you. Thanks for listening. The Stitch People podcast is a production of Beansky LLC and Stitch People. Copyright 2022, all rights reserved.